Yeah, we're here. I'm Brett Gorman. Nice to meet you guys again.
Hi, Brett. I go by Average Gary online. That's how most of you will know me if I'm coming into your ears.
Nice.
I'm Rick or Montani. Uh, Call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for dinner. Am I right?
Just
That was cool.
what are we doing here, fellas? What is this thing?
Yeah, so I was on the Signal chat group and I was like, hey, what are some advanced Bitcoin mining podcasts that I could learn from? And Rick sent out a bunch of podcasts and I listened to them all and they're good. But I'm thinking I want more. I want something a little deeper. I want to get into the theology of Bitcoin mining, of the code, the stuff that Gary, that I'm sure. And, I'm not going to be just a taker. I do know some things about Bitcoin mining, but I really want to I just want to learn and be more of a student, but I can contribute in where I can. And that's kind of where I'm at. And so then Gary, came out and was like, hey, if someone wants to produce it, I'll do it. And so I was like, all right. I thought about it for a couple of days and I'm like, I think I can try to figure out a way to automate all this. I've been wanting to do it anyway for other reasons. So this is kind of cool. And come to find out, there's a lot of good AI tech to make things easier for podcasts. So here I am.
Absolutely. And I mean, Bitcoin veterans is the common thread through all this, right? And
Right.
hence the branding of this and hence the nature of this. And anytime that I can just be a pretty face and a talking voice, I'm down for it, right? That's the least I can the least I can contribute.
Well, I appreciate it. And Rick is just highly motivated to be a part of it as well and contribute probably along the same stream of thought that I'm at. Um, we hope have our unique experiences, but I kind of just like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I look at you, Gary, as the teacher of this group. But I know things ebb and flow, and we'll just kind of see how things go.
Absolutely. I'm always, the best teachers are always learning, right? And you learn something enough to explain it to others. That's when you become a teacher at that point. And there is definitely a lot more on the, I think, business side or operations side of mining that I would expect myself to be learning from you two, because I'm maybe 180 IQ dev, but when it comes to business or finance shenanigans, that's like the 80 IQ, right? Hence the average Gary part. Everybody compliments me on the place that I can bring it up, but I don't mention a lot of the places where I can bring it down, and a lot of that is on the business and operation side because it's just not my bag, and it's not anything that I get deeply involved in on a regular basis. So hope to level up myself in that regard because mining is of where the physical meets the digital when it comes to Bitcoin, and that physical aspect of the beans, bullets, and band-aids, as our brothers in arms would call it, is I think where you guys are going to contribute to this conversation, at least
Oh,
myself, in taking learn me some more about how this thing works.
okay. Rick, sorry for taking up all the airtime. Do you have any comments or what are your thoughts and feelings about perhaps the charter of this Bitcoin veterans mining pod?
I don't want to hear your feelings.
Well, I feel
Just thoughts.
No kidding. No,
uh
feelings are okay.
Emotions are not allowed.
yeah, no, I'd say, where I fit in, I'm an enthusiast. I am a pleb miner. Uh love the space, hoping to, be more involved in it going forward. Uh just, you guys know I left my federal job and I got 6 months to kind of figure out where I fit in. So that's what I'm doing here.
So what is Bitcoin mining, Rick?
Bitcoin mining is a dog barking at the mailman going by. Hold on. Let me mute. You guys go.
You're good. What is Bitcoin mining, Brett? Like, I mean, this is the first episode, ostensibly, and
Okay.
we're probably going to have a lot of newbies, like maybe to Bitcoin, but definitely to Bitcoin mining if they're going to be listening to this. So, like, what is Bitcoin mining?
Basically, you have a piece of hardware that runs a bunch of very simple math problems, trillions of times per second, and validates a peer-to-peer network, similar to like BitTorrents, were back in the day, like LimeWire and things like that, in order to forward a digital ledger of transactions in a decentralized manner or good enough decentralized manner.
Okay. I can get on board with that. Rick, did you wanted to add to anything there? Because I have a few
Yeah.
things, and they might just be little tisms of like pedantic word terminology and everything like that. But I'm curious to hear what Rick's like. What is Bitcoin mining, Rick?
It's a magic shoebox turning electricity into magic internet money, as far as I understand it, right?
That's probably that's a pretty succinct explanation. But yeah, you're not wrong.
Borrowing a
Um,
little bit from Rob Warren on that one.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned Rob Warren too, because I think we'll start with yours, Rick, because it was the most succinct. But like the shoebox aspect, that to me, I think in 5 to 10 years is going to be a legacy thought. I don't think they're going to go away, but you are right. Like there are these machines that we run ostensibly in data centers across the world, whether that's a small scale server data center like singular thing or like a giant mega mine next to a natural gas power plant. But the form factor of those machines looks like a shoebox. But with Rob Warren, who you mentioned specifically, and the initiatives at the 256 Foundation, I think we're going to see a renaissance of form factors and sort of the way that that Bitcoin mining is integrating itself with the rest of like the technology landscape. And and I guess Brett, to your explanation, one of the things that I would like to call out on that one was the verification or the validation. Um, I think, well, not I think, but like that is not necessarily happening during the mining process. It is one component of the mining process, but really that's happening by the nodes themselves, right?
Right. Well, mining was part of the nodes originally,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And then they split it off, which would be a great topic to learn about right now because you know why they split it off and how it was done?
Uh, I mean, it was done using this thing called stratum a long time ago, and the why is likely because we don't have ASICs or application specific integrated circuits in our laptops or our desktops, and those are more easily and readily available in the shoebox form factor that Rick alluded to. And
Mhm.
so it was sort of I think the specialization of chips that led to it being removed from the nodes themselves because your node is not going to have specialized SHA-256 chips in them. But you can put a very, very basic computer on these specialized chips, like control board is what it would be referred to in these shoe boxes. And then that can talk over the internet to a computer that sort of coordinates things, commonly referred to as like pooling software, more technically referred to as stratum software, stratum being the protocol used for mining to sort of like pool all of these resources together.
Why they call it stratum?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I
Yeah.
have no idea why it's called stratum. That's a fantastic
I
question.
have lots of questions like this.
Okay. Well, whatever questions I can answer today, I think we should note it
I'm
down.
thinking like even if we come up with stuff like this could be a good pod to like figure stuff out and
Yeah.
be very humble about our knowledge base. I'm trying, um, like there's so many questions I have.
Well,
And
I have no idea why they called him stratum.
I always wanted to know about that too, about the node. The node used to have the mining, like everything was in Bitcoin Core, was it not?
It was, yeah.
And then they split the mining off. So is it even possible to mine like with the original core software? Or
It
do you
is. Yeah. Well, I don't recall if like the specific command exists on current Bitcoin Core versions.
yeah.
But one of the core features of Bitcoin is sort of this backwards compatibility, right? Like the idea that even if you're running version 0.1, that still works for the blockchain as it exists today. And so you can go run older versions of Bitcoin Core that still have this mining feature and mine with your CPU. And it's yeah, it was called set generate and it was
Okay.
a background miner. But that's been since removed just because of the if, lack of efficiency, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay. So what do you, um, I'm just going to keep going if
Yeah, yeah.
like I've got lots of questions. So please interrupt me, Rick. if you want to say something. So how do we evolve into CG Miner or CK Pool and Concolat? He contributed a lot to this open source protocol. What do you know about all that?
So the CG miner, I believe that's still being used actively today. I think that is the actual like the mining software, and when I say that, I mean um, the thing that goes through and will roll nonces to generate a bunch of different hashes. And this is where we might be bumping up against the limitation of my knowledge.
No, it's
Is
fine. I'm actually going to take notes of things,
yeah,
and then we can look them up, and then perhaps the next podcast we answer some of these questions too. I think that's a great idea.
yeah. But the CG miner, to my understanding, it's like a C program that implemented sort of I don't want to say maybe it is the strata mining, like how strata mining works, but it was a process of like the process that enabled um I mean modern ASICs to my understanding run CG miner still to it.
Yeah, and well, they have and then brains. I think those just called like BOS Miner or something. They just kind of like renamed it, or maybe they developed their own. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But the CK pool I know still is in existence today, and you've seen recently, recently being we're in April of 2025, recently, blocks being mined by CK pool users,
Yeah.
where there's just a fixed percentage, I think it's like 2% or something like that, of a dev fee that goes to essentially whoever's running CK pool. But then the rest of it's a solo mining sort of like lottery thing. A lot
Yeah,
of
what
people
was
call it
there?
like a
Three?
solo pool.
What was the percentage again?
I think it's like 2%. We can go look that up on the
All right.
docs.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I'm just writing the notes for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what was there? 3 blocks last month that were mined on CK Pool?
Dang, that's pretty good. I don't know. I'm looking up right now.
Yeah, one of them might have been public pool, actually.
A pool is
Well, they have a pool and then they have the solo.org. Solo.ckpool.org is why you do the solo mining. Like I have a bid axe and I just have a solo mine. I'm using CK.
but I believe CK pool is not pool in the sense of pooling resources, but it's a way of delivering work to your miners. When I say work, I mean a block template to hash on.
Okay, so speak to the block templates. What is that exactly?
So block template, all right. So just in Bitcoin in general, you have these ideas of blocks, right? Which is specific ordering of transactions. And then the very first transaction of every single block is something called the Coinbase transaction. Um, that Coinbase transaction is the newly minted Bitcoin. And this is the stuff that's on that predetermined schedule where you have not just the block subsidy, which is right now is like 3.125 Bitcoin, but you also have the fees paid out in the Coinbase transaction, right? So every transaction in the Bitcoin network slices off like a little bit extra to pay fees to the miners. It's like an incentive to the miner to include your transaction in a block. These are all paid out in the Coinbase transaction. It's always the very first transaction of every single Bitcoin block. So what these pools do and what CK pool does in general is you give it your username, which is just a Bitcoin address, and then CK pool takes that Bitcoin address and creates a block template, like meaning an ordering of transaction that fits the block size, and then creates stratum work for your miner to then operate on. And that block template, though, in the Coinbase, right? One of the things that I'm assuming CK Pool does behind the scenes, I haven't dug into the code myself, is create that Coinbase transaction where it pays you, the majority of it, but then the percentage that goes to CK Pool gets paid out to a different address. And so one of the things you'll see sort of critiqued or commented on is this idea of block template creation, like who actually puts the transactions into the block.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that a lot of modern pools will provide is they provide not only like work to be worked on as far as like stratum work goes, as mining work goes, but that's being derived from the block template itself. So the pool is accounting for your hash rate, and then it's also deciding what transactions you're going to be putting into blocks. And that's through template generation.
So that's where you define like PPS, FPP, PPLNS, like the payment structure.
Yeah, and that's more of the accounting of, right? Okay, so let's take a step back. There's a few functions that a pool, modern pools as it exists today, as most people know pools, is they provide a few different functions. One is this accounting that you just referred to, and the two most common accounting methods is called full paper share, or FPPS. You see that with like Foundry or Antpool. I think Brains even moved to it. And then you see one called PPLNS, which is pay per last N shares, where N is some sort of like variable number that's done behind the scenes. And the difference between those is N shares means there's sort of like a window of shares that are valid, right? It's pay per last N shares, and that N, as it changes, is sort of like a sliding window of how many shares are valid that you can be paid for as an individual miner. This is very, very distinctly different when compared to FPPS, which is full paper share, which means every share that you submit, you get a like sort of a set amount, right? You're being paid for every single share, no matter what. Let me go back to like the functions of the mining pool, right? So the accounting being like the one and the most like sort of well understand maybe or commonly understood is like you're pulling your resources. That pool is then accounting for how much hash rate you're providing and is going to pay you out accordingly, depending on what accounting mechanism they use. The other thing that happens at a mining pool is they create the work and the templates, right? And more specifically, like these things kind of go hand in hand because the work, the jobs that are given to these mining devices, these ASICs, are derived from the template that is created, right? And so there's a couple things there because in one sense, like a pool really only cares about that Coinbase transaction because the pool wants to be paid, right? You don't get paid out necessarily in the Coinbase unless you're mining with like Ocean Pool. They give you the option of paying out in the Coinbase. They're unique in that fashion. But generally speaking, you're mining to a pool. That pool is being paid in that Coinbase transaction. And then you're trusting that the pool is going to pay you Bitcoin or fiat on the back end of that based on how much hash rate you've provided, right?
Ocean lets you. So how does Ocean guarantee that they don't get? What's the risk to Ocean? What's Ocean's risk?
What is the risk to Ocean?
Like, yeah, like other pools, the risk would be that they don't hit a block, and then they still have to pay out all the shares, but they don't have any Bitcoin to pay out.
Correct.
So then will belong. This is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but then Ocean, if they're paying out straight from the Coinbase, do they have a risk, or are they just like open source? Like they're they're just benevolent.
No, their risk is hash rate, right? Because no matter who you are, right? If you're mining and mining, like you said, Rick, like taking these magic shoeboxes, putting electricity into it, like that electricity has a cost, right? So your risk from mining with Ocean is if there's not enough hash rate pointing to Ocean Pool, then the block variance goes up, right? There's a lot of time in between blocks. You're not going to find a block as consistently, which means you're not getting paid as consistently.
So the miner takes the risk in Ocean.
Correct. And then also Ocean, right? Like they have infrastructure they have to maintain. So I'm sure they're taking some percentage somehow, right? They have fees that are all outlined on their website. But it's all risk on the miner variance. And that's sort of like what pools were designed to do is sort of take that, or not what they were designed to do, but what they evolved into as a business model was, Foundry was like, hey guys, we'll pay you for every share that you give us, right? But what they're doing is they are saying, hey, we're going to take on that risk. We're going to guarantee that you get paid a certain amount. Like if you give us, 5 exahash worth of hash, this is how much you're going to be guaranteed to pay out, right? That from a business perspective makes it nice because your electricity provider for your mining sites don't care if you found a block or not. They still
Right.
they still need their money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so Ocean And then you also look at like big solo miners, right? So like Mara is a big solo miner. That company has just inherent risk of block variance as well. If they are doing something wrong or if they don't mine blocks, then they just don't get paid. But they still have those bills due at the end of the month. So it's a shifting of risk from a business perspective on the different pools. And that was one of the things that like Ocean offered, I think, a promotional like fee rate over like a certain amount of months when they first launched, is because you need to bootstrap your pool to have enough hash to find enough blocks on a consistent enough basis to make sure everybody's getting paid enough to not go under, right?
Are you saying that I could mine on Marathon's pool if I wanted to right now?
I have no idea. You might be able to if you could figure out what their stratum URL is. You
Um,
and I don't know what kind of like gatekeeping they have around there. But again, if you're mining to their quote unquote pool, which is not really a pool, they're just solo mining. If you're mining to that pool, really you're just mining to enrich them, but they have no like there's no obligation there for
right,
them to
right.
pay you, right? Like so
I,
you're just giving them a hash rate for free. There's no payout mechanism, right?
why
Compare
didn't
that.
made a public pool or anything like Brains?
No, yeah, I'm not aware of them offering that.
Yeah, I never heard of that either. That's why I was like, oh,
Yeah, that's why they're the biggest solar miner, right? Like is ostensibly they're not a pool necessarily. They are a single entity mining for themselves. And so their business, if they have a streak of bad luck where they don't find any blocks across, 3 months, I mean like that
yeah.
the electricity costs, their employees, all that kind of stuff still has to be paid.
Who
And so
else is solar mining in the industry? Like big
Well, Clean
solar
Smart,
miner.
they go through Foundry, I believe. You can go to their wallet and see like every day they're getting paid out by Foundry. So I
What
know there
site?
was some talk
What
of them
site do you
splitting
use
off.
for all that? I know we got. There's a couple. Like, what are? Let's do that. What are some favorite mining sites that you get data from? Rick and Gary.
What was the Arkham was the one that I used.
oh, that surveillance firm?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do you
I mean,
spell it?
it's kind of shady, man. It kind of goes against like the idea of like the anonymity that you want to have. I
Yes and
mean,
no, it's a public blockchain.
yeah, it is what it is, right? I mean, like the information's there, and if you got detectives that can like look it up, it's fine. Like I don't know, it still feels weird, like to out somebody that doesn't want their information out there. So
The
uh,
website is intel.arkm.com. It's Arkham Intel. I personally I go to mempool.space for most of my like
Mempool
yeah, mempool.
dot space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been
and then
there.
if you scroll down, you can go to there's a mining tab
Yep.
like on the left at the bottom of the page,
Good.
and you can see like the breakdown of the biggest pools, and you can see the blocks as they come in, uh,
Oh,
who's mined it and stuff.
One a fun thing too is, they have these sort of like an exahash, right? So I'm looking at mempool.space, it says 830 exahash for like a 1 week thing, but there's no way to know definitively how much hash rate is actually online. All hash rate measurements are like a guess. Based,
Yeah,
really?
and that's
yes.
so
Based on
on the
what? Sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say like to that like the people that invest in these public mining companies, they'll often like look at like a 20 because they do a 24-hour average and divide it by the estimated um total hash rate, global hash rate. And like some days, like Mara specifically, when they were ramping up, they were having some operations issues, and it would show that they would have like 13 exahash in a day when they're supposed to be posting like 30. But like it doesn't account for luck, number one. Obviously you're going to be able to tell some downtime and stuff, but there's days where they wouldn't hit a block and they're still rocking. At that point it was like 23, I think, was their target exahash, but they would show like 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a function of like the number of blocks found. And this is actually gets down to the actual like the stratum protocol, right? So what your miners are doing when you're mining with a pool, like the way that you demonstrate to a pool that you're actually trying, right? Proof of work, right? This is a proof that you're working. Is you create this, you create an almost block, is what I call it. And it's commonly referred to as a share, right? You submit these shares to the mining pool, but all a share is the mining pool gives you a block to mine on as a miner. And go ahead.
A template, you mean?
Yeah, a template. You get a block template that you're mining on. And as you're running this through the SHA-256 algorithm over and over and over again, eventually you will encounter a hash that has a lot of leading zeros on it, right? Then that's this thing called the difficulty for the proof of work, but it's not sufficient for the network to recognize it, right? So there's a certain difficulty on the network, a certain amount of leading zeros on the network that the Bitcoin network itself all is able to come to a consensus on based on this algorithm, right? Of like block times looking back over like 2 weeks or something like that. And this difficulty goes up and down roughly every 2 weeks, or 216,000 or 2016 blocks. But what you're doing when you're submitting these shares is you're saying, hey, I got really, really close. Like, look at this. I know I needed like 10 leading zeros, but this one has 7. So can you give me some credit for it? And then
Really?
based on the pool, they have a threshold because you don't want to be flooded with a bunch of like extraneous messages. So a pool will generally set a threshold and say, hey, I only want to see shares that are like 5 zeros or better, right? And I'm really simplifying some of the things here, but the concept is the same, where it says, hey, me as a pool, only tell me about things that are 5 zeros or better, right? And so when you look at that from like an S21 perspective versus like a bidax, the chances of finding, a hash with 5 leading zeros, like a S21 is doing so many more hashes per second than a bidax that they're going to find those a lot faster. So if you set that to like, hey, I know the network wants 10 leading zeros, but if you can show me 5, I'll give you credit, right? And those shares are submitted when you have like an almost block. And I call them an almost block because it's a valid block. It just doesn't meet the difficulty of the Bitcoin network. It meets some threshold just.
Oh no. Are you still there, Rick?
Thinking too.
You didn't pull it out of thin air. You had to run electricity through these ASIC machines to get to 5 leading zeros, right? Or whatever that difficulty is. So I can know for certain that you were trying, and then I can tie that back to like a block template to make sure that you were mining to a specific Coinbase address, right? Because I want to make sure you're mining. Like if I'm going to give you credit, I want to make sure that it's like you're mining to my address as the pool.
Basically, it's like a filter. So the pool can set their filter to
Yes.
kind of like when we're on Zillow house hunting. I only want to see houses that are 2,000 square feet or larger.
Yes.
And so it kind of filters it down. So now why would they not go a step further and say, set their difficulty, the pool? So basically what you're saying is there's pool difficulty and then there's Bitcoin network difficulty. They're two separate things. They're correlated, but you have to think about them separately. So the pool has to run their node to validate that sends out their block templates, and then they're going to say, hey, I only want to see nonces. Would that be the numbers that are rolling through?
Nonces are part of it. It would be, I only want to see hashes that meet a certain difficulty. And one of the parts of that share submission, right? So when I submit this thing to you, I'll say, hey, look I found this cool hash and it
Yeah,
meets
the
your
hash.
difficulty.
And that's not the same as a nonce?
No, because the nonce is what you input, right? So there's this block template that is being passed out. And then part of that for these like the jobs that are being created for these different miners, part of that job is like, hey, look in this range of numbers, in this range of nonces. And nonce stands for numbers used once,
Yeah.
which is like a cryptography term. But in the mining sense, it's this thing that you're constantly changing.
Right.
Right? So you have the same block template with the same transactions and the same Coinbase, but you're constantly changing this thing called the nonce. And there's different aspects to the nonce that we don't have to get into today, but you're constantly changing this thing called the nonce. But when I find that hash that has the leading zeros, right? When I find something that is, whether it's the winning block, right? It has 10 leading zeros, let's say, or whether it's sufficient enough to prove that I'm working with its 5 leading zeros, I can say, hey, you remember that block template you gave me? Take this nonce, run it through the algorithm, the SHA-256 algorithm, and it will give you this hash with the leading zeros.
I
So
see.
that's like validation, right?
So,
Because you can give me a hash that looks
ah,
valid, but I
but-
can then quickly validate based on the block template that I gave you if your nonce actually creates that hash or not.
so the nonce is the beginning number that produces the hash at the end.
The nonce is the piece that you're changing.
So every nonce produces the hash that we're looking for the zeros on, correct?
Right. Yeah. You're constantly
One
rolling
way
it.
direction, you can't trace it back to the nonce. Am I right?
Correct. Which is why you need to give the nonce to the pool with the
Yeah.
share that you're providing. So that way the pool, right? Because you might run through 500 trillion hashes to find a value with leading zeros, with 5 leading zeros.
And this is happening trillions and billions of gazillion times a second across the world, like just so wickedly fast. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Like it's unfathomable.
Yes. I've done an exercise a few times where it's like
This is crazy.
the number of leading zeros, right? So we're at what, 837 exahash, right? So
Gotta be like 20 by now, right? The last time I checked, it was like 16 zeros, but that was like a while ago.
below an exahash is a terahash. Below a terahash is a petahash. Below a petahash,
Petahash is above terahash.
you're right. It's exahash, petahash,
Tera.
terahash,
Gigahash.
gigahash, megahash, kilohash,
And
and
then
then hash. So that's 3,
Right.
6, 9, 12, 15, 18 zeros. So 837 and then 15 zeros
holy smokes.
A lot of hash.
per second. That's a per second measurement.
I mean, dang, dude.
Our brains can't, our brains just don't, like the
Whatsoever.
numbers that big. It's like the national debt. Like nobody really understands just how in debt we are, but it's a really, really big number.
Why doesn't the pool just filter 15 zeros and above? Why does it go into 5 0? Like, how do we know? How do they determine optimal number of shares? Is it based on equipment and hardware that's available on the market? Is that how they set it? And is it just a Wizard of Oz, some guy behind a curtain that says, yeah, I'm going to go for 10 zeros today?
Well, one, there's the network. There's the Bitcoin network, right? So Bitcoin Core has a mathematical formula to determine what is the difficulty for a given epoch of difficulty time, right? And this thing that goes up and down. So you kind of look at what the network is, and if the network is at 20 leading zeros, you as a pool, you want to reach that. But what you also want to know is, I want to know that you're trying, right? And this is where like the hardware factors into all this. You mentioned hardware. How do I know that you're actually trying on this block template that I give you? And the way that I know is that you give me shares. You give me almost blocks. Well, if you're mining, if you want to mine with a bidax, you're not going to find, if the network is 20 leading zeros, you as a bidax might not find anywhere near 10 leading zeros for like a year, right? Just the way that the mathematical function, like the statistics of it all works out, is with something with lower hash rate, the chances of you finding something with more leading zeros is less. But I still want you to check in with me. I still want you, because if I'm going to pay you, right, and whether this is a bidax or this is an S21, it doesn't matter. It's the same principle. I want you to check in with me every 30 seconds, let's say, or every 60 seconds, or whatever you want that to be. And this is all a matter of like technical limitations. Because if I have 10,000, if I have 100,000 miners and they all need to check in with me, I can't have them all checking in with me like every second, because that will just, I'll denial of service myself. My network will be overloaded, and it just doesn't work out. So the way you mitigate that is you say there's mathematical calculations that go into, hey, I want you to check in every 60 seconds. So if you register with me as a miner and I start providing you jobs and 60 seconds goes by, you haven't sent me anything, it's probably because you didn't meet that target. You didn't meet the difficulty threshold, right? So you register with me and I say, hey, here's some work to do and make sure you're checking it. Here's the difficulty of it. I need you to find 15 leading zeros at a minimum because the network's at like 20. Well, you're mining with a bit axe, right? And you're like, okay, I'll try. And after 60 seconds, I might, depending on how the software is written, and this goes into like pool software and stuff, depending on how the software is written, I might go to you after those 60 seconds to say, hey, I haven't seen anything from you. I know we still have this active network connection that's still open. Let me lower that difficulty because maybe you're having problems hitting 15. Can you give me 10 or better, right? Now I'm going to weigh those less, right? Because it's proving that you have less hash rate. So there's like a weighting mechanism on the accounting side of the pool that goes into this. But generally speaking, there's like a negotiation. It's called VARDIF or variable difficulty between the ASIC and the pool, where the pool is going to constantly kind of reassess how often. Now, conversely, if I go, hey, I want 15 leading zeros or better, and you're like an S20, you have like 1,000 S21s and you're just like crushing hash, and you just start like pinging me with these like, here's a 15, here's 16, here's 17 leading zeros. But I'm like getting so many messages from your one single individual miner or your one single individual entity. I may say, hey, like calm down. Let's ramp that up to like 18 leading zeros, right? Like I know you've got a lot of hash, like you've demonstrated this to me, but you're sending me too much network traffic in one direction. So I need you to like kind of ramp that down. And this is all an engineering problem of sort of load balancing the data that's coming into your server, because pools are running on these servers, right? And the amount of data that's coming in, especially if you're like a huge miner, right? So think about Foundry, right? Like Foundry has an estimated 264 exahash of per second. So
So
per second, their servers are processing that much. They can't just have it constantly ping, right? They have
right.
to have just like a filter, a way of filtering that. And the way they do that is by time generally.
Oh, time.
Yeah, like if you register as an individual mining, like a user, a mining worker, right? There's like a username and a worker name. You as an individual worker might have more or less hash rate. So there's like an ongoing negotiation between the pool and the worker to set that difficulty. So that way you're not sending me too many messages. Cause by the way, I'm getting messages from like everybody across the world, but you're still sending me messages enough that I can count and tally it off. Right. Like
Yeah, but you also like these are high quality shares. If you're doing 15, leading zeros or whatever.
high
Like,
quality shares mean nothing to the Bitcoin network.
right.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to quench them. You want them to.
Yes.
So what I was thinking is there a way to make like a load balancer, but a stratum load balancer? I know might sound stupid, but I'm not afraid to sound stupid.
No, you're right. Like, yes, there
So
is.
you
And
have
that's what,
multiple nodes basically that
Mhm.
send multiple templates and they balance it out. They spread it out. So like maybe the bit axes get a little bit of this node, but then the load balancer decides how to distribute the templates accordingly.
yeah. And historically, and I'm not sure that if they do it anymore this way, but historically, there were different ports that you would want to use if
Okay.
you're mining with a
Go through
certain
that.
amount of hash rate, right?
Yeah. Like
Um,
334, and then there's 3333.
right. And
Um,
so they would tell you, hey, with this amount of hash rate, mine with this port. And that's because the service running on that port is probably configured to either allow a higher or a lower difficulty.
or sometimes regional, like if you're in Europe.
Absolutely. Regional also matters, right? Latency is another huge factor in mining because it's all a race. It's
Mhm.
always a race to find the block and to get your block out there once you found it.
So we've covered so far block templates, mining pool work in the templates, stratum, almost block. I like the almost block that helped me. And then hash versus nonce. But I think hash versus nonce is the same as like shared pool difficulty versus Bitcoin network difficulty. No, it's not, but
Mm,
it's a similar argument. Um,
no. A hash versus so a nonce goes into a hash as part of the input,
correct.
right?
I'm just thinking of terms to define for the audience and myself. And I'm going to put show notes on this, by the way. And I also want to assign I want to come back. I'm going to educate myself. And then for the next one, know a little bit more about it. And I'm sure it'll just open up more questions,
Uh,
for
there's a
you.
limitless rabbit hole here.
I want to, well, that's awesome. So we'll never run out of stuff to talk about.
And you've already challenged my knowledge too. Like there's some of these things I'm just like, man, like I can see where these questions might lead, and I don't know that yet. So
That's
I'm
great.
hungry to go learn more.
Yeah. What,
Yeah,
what, what, what are you thinking, Rick?
well, I was just thinking, I have a question about the mechanism by which the network can be censored. Like when they were excluding, was it addresses they were excluding on the FINRA list?
Oh,
Uh,
OFAC censoring? Yeah.
yeah.
What's
So
that?
they do that at the template level, right?
That would be at the template level. Yes, because when like miners are dumb, right? Like they're it's dumb software. Like the devices themselves.
The devices, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and some of the actual people mining too. Like you don't have to be smart. You just plug it in and point it to a URL. And historically that's been a successful thing, right? So it's not like a dumb per se. But the devices themselves are pretty dumb, right? They speak the stratum thing and they do the SHA-256, but they don't do a lot much more. And I think we're gonna see a difference there, and that's another topic for another day. But yes, if you are not creating your block templates for you, whatever entity is creating that block template, you're trusting that they're including all of the economically rational transactions, right? Um, and with this sort of like OFAC thing, they have this like list of addresses, which are like naughty addresses that you're not supposed to send money to, um, which is kind of ridiculous because you can just create a new address with the same keys and then now you're not on the list. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But you can filter and censor, but one, the network will like push back. And by the network, I mean like the people in Bitcoin. But then secondly, okay, you mine one block and you censored this, transaction that is on the naughty list. But the next block is found by some other pool or some other miner that didn't care about your stupid list of transactions that are naughty, and they just mined it anyway because it had a fat fee on it. Right?
So shoot
Yeah.
yourself in the foot. How do you spell that? OFAC? OFAC?
Yeah, yeah, it's like the Office of Financial Controls or something like that. It's a U.S. Monetary thing.
Okay. Hey, while we're spelling stuff, go back to that Arkham Intel.ark. How do you spell that?
arkm.com. Arkham Intelligence or Arkham Intel.
ARKM.com.
Yep.
What
Yeah,
was
it's
the
like
Intel dot what?
Intel.arkm.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Oh, I just want to put that in the notes too.
I would just use pull.space. But yeah, it's a
Well,
lot of resources.
I never
in there.
use those. I just want to check them out now because I'm curious.
Yeah. There's also, I think, they're commonly referred to as like block explorers,
Yeah. I usually use Blockstream
right? Yep.
because I just been following them forever. I really like it. I don't know Adam, but I'm always like I love Adam, but I never like
Blockstream.info. I literally just pulled that up to recommend.
And then one time I was driving in my car and I saw Adam walking on the sidewalk and I was like a teenage girl seeing Taylor Swift. I was like yelling out the window. I was like, "Hi, Adam." That's good.
Rightly so. Rightly so. He's contributed a lot to this
Who's that
space.
crazy dude, man?
Yeah. Well, what else, fellas? I mean, I think we're coming up on the end of our allocated time, and I know we didn't get fully hit the full hour because we had a little technical hiccup at the beginning. But was this as expected, or?
It was better than I expected because I was like, I don't know where this is gonna go. I'm not prepared. We should have an outline.
I think the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is there are so many rabbit holes to go down, and even just in the mining space itself, like we could talk about energy one day, right? We could talk about
Oh,
whatever. There's so many things to talk about within the Bitcoin and more specifically the Bitcoin mining space that if we start an episode and we have nothing to talk about, then like Bitcoin failed, pack it up, we're going home.
That's a good point. Good point.
Any closing thoughts, Gary?
Be peaceful, not harmless.
Cool.
Right.
I don't have any thoughts. I just have questions.
Yeah, nothing but questions. Questions are good. That's my thought for the day.
I'll bring some thoughts next week.
Look
Or
forward to it.
thank you, Rick. Thank you, Gary. See you next time.
Yeah.
Signing off.
Bye.